The next-gen consoles have it. The latest graphics cards support it. Yes, I'm talking about a hefty price tag, but I'm also talking about ray tracing, which begs the question, what would CSGO with ray tracing be like? Well, first off, people would complain that it drops frame rates, and for that reason alone it would be a bad idea to add it. And, because it could give those who do use it various advantages, it couldn't be added to a game as competitive as CSGO because people without it would deem it to be unfair. But let's imagine that everybody had computers capable of running ray tracing, at unlimited frames a second, and that CSGO was upgraded to a magical version of Source 2 that supported full ray tracing. What would it be like? So far, there have been very few fully ray-traced games. Quake 2 and Minecraft are the ones that come to mind, and if you like this sort of graphical technology, then you're going to love those. They just look right, and while some will insist that a high-resolution texture pack looks better, they're wrong. They just don't know it yet. As for Counter-Strike, we don't have to speculate about what ray tracing would be like. I can just load up Reshade, download Marty Fly's RTGI plugin, and show you what it would look like. Speaking of sharing, this video is sponsored by Skillshare, a site full of classes on all kinds of creative topics like animation, music production and crafts. And best of all, these are all taught by masters of their field. It's easy to check out their credentials so you can be safe in the fact that they know what they're doing. Want to learn how to 3D model? Maybe you finally want to know how to shuffle a deck of cards. Or maybe you just want to browse and see what takes your fancy today. I am often surprised by what I end up watching, and it's often the topics that I don't know anything about that I have the most enthusiasm to learn about. Skillshare is an easy site for you to lose yourself in as you brush up on existing skills or begin honing new ones. As a YouTuber, I greatly appreciated MKBHD's series, showing the behind the scenes of another successful YouTube channel and the great ways he comes up with to keep himself enthusiastic and motivated. The first 1,000 of my subscribers to click the link in the description will get a free trial of premium membership so you can explore your creativity. Speaking of creative exploration, here is CSGO, Raytraced. Only it isn't really. Firstly, because CSGO does not like Reshade. Not one bit, because you could use it to cheat, so it's been all but blocked from working. And second, even if I could get it working, I'd run the risk of getting VAC banned. So I don't recommend trying this. I was very careful with it all and then immediately reformatted after using it. And even with all that, I'm still sat here worried that the VAC ban hammer will land on my account at some point in the near future. I ended up getting it working with Gmod actually, using whatever pre-made workshop maps I could get my hands on. And wow, this actually looks quite impressive. What's it doing exactly? Obviously this is not full, proper ray tracing. This is just getting what's visible on screen, which it then fires rays out of in all directions, painting where they land with the colour and brightness from whence they came. This is global illumination. If there's a red surface, it will make the area around it glow red. If an area is lit up in sunlight, it will light the parts around it with that sort of light. In other words, it illuminates stuff globally, or at least screen spatially. Check out this pillar on Overpass. It looks so warm and lit up by the sunlight it's receiving from the ground in front of it. Of course, this is all ruined the moment I move my view up, since the ground is no longer visible and therefore no longer shoots rays up to the pillar, meaning it returns back to its cold original colours again. Now this is impressive, given that it's got nothing to go on other than the depth buffer and, I don't know, some directional information. It's not like it's got full engine access and support to whatever information it needs, like proper ray-traced implementations no doubt have. So yes, try to see past the limitations here and try to appreciate it for what it is, rather than what it isn't. Let's hop on over to Safehouse, which Gmod supports quite well. This is it without ray tracing, and this is it with. You can spot more realistic shading in the corners, like where the roof intersects with the walls, and how the interior is made darker because fewer rays are reaching it than the rest of the screen. But the most noticeable difference has to be to the colours. Notice how the warm coloured wooden walls are reflecting onto these chimney stones, or onto these dark coloured roofing tiles here. The walkway around the base now looks very nicely lit up and welcoming. Returning to the non-ray traced version again is a wake-up call to how boringly lit source maps are by default. Another example is this red room. Notice how the walls are all their own colours. They all stick to themselves, which isn't bad, but enabling ray-traced global illumination allows for the stronger colours to bleed out onto their surrounding areas. The chimney is made red where it connects with the walls, and this red wall is made to look orangey thanks to the yellow wall next to it. And again, you can see it more accurately shades the darker corners as well, like behind the bookshelves, the table, or the plants. My criticism of this scene would be that the effect is too strong, but then that's on me because I dialed it up just to show you what it does. It is, after all, lighting being added to existing lighting, but I feel after seeing this, the original source version and its unenthusiastic light bounces leave much to be desired. Ray tracing makes this yellow room yellower and darkens the patches above the lights because they aren't exposed to the ground. In this example in particular, I think it does a great job of shading above the cabinets, which the baked-in lighting found in Source fails to accurately simulate. It just looks full bright. The white doors in this scene light up the ground around them and any surfaces facing them, and cast shadows across the ceiling. Obviously, the effect in reality wouldn't be so pronounced unless the doors could somehow emit their own light, or were being lit up with a particularly powerful spotlight. But it's a pleasing effect. And for the last example on Safehouse is this outdoor shot, where the light green grass casts a yellowy greeny light onto the walls and onto the underside of the slide. I started with the Raytraced example this time, because sometimes I think it looks so right that you forget how wrong the non-Raytraced example looks in comparison, which I'll show here. Another great example of this is on this version of Dust 2. Yes, I know it's an old version, and yes, I can see the error messages everywhere. But these are actually perfect for demonstrating the ray-traced global illumination. The red, as it gets brighter, shines more of that light onto the walls around it. Again, the effect stops the moment the red error sign is no longer visible in the first place. But I think this is the most convincing example I've seen to demonstrate what ray-traced global illumination could bring to the game, that being lots of bright lights and error messages. In Tides, a map I think is criminally underrated, I couldn't even notice the effect at first, because all of the surfaces of this map are quite dark in colour already. But we can soon change that. By upping the bounce lighting, this map practically glows, and creeping through these tulips transforms the screen into a disco. So I wonder, what happens if I disable the lighting? Can this global illumination solution hope to replace the baked-in lighting that Counter-Strike currently relies upon? No, it appears that this version of global illumination at least is heavily reliant on the map already receiving realistic lighting. Don't get me wrong, this ray-traced illumination does a whole lot of good. It's great for darkening areas which wouldn't receive much lighting, like down the side of this car here. The ray tracing also does a good job of lighting the wall up where the flames are from the car. All this, again, disappears as the car moves off the side of the screen. In conclusion, yes, you can get ray tracing for Counter-Strike, but it isn't what you think it is. In some parts I will admit that it looks quite convincing, but you only have to move a bit or to turn slightly for the illusion to break. Because although this reshade plugin is doing the best it can, it's got very limited resources to work with here. It's incredible it can do this much using just a depth buffer, honestly. But in a way, using this you end up with the worst of both worlds, being the framerate impact of lots of rays, but without the consistent, good-looking results. And you might also get VAC banned. A better example of the difference global illumination can make would be Metro Exodus Enhanced Edition. That game has a much more robust implementation of global illumination. It supports infinite light bounces, and the result is super soft shadows and convincingly lit and coloured environments, which are far more stable in nature than the ones seen in Gmod. But it does contain a lot of horror jump scares, so I'll leave it to 2clicks Philip to endure the delights of that particular title. But global illumination is just one aspect of ray tracing. Another would be the reflections, which I don't think I need to explain the benefit of. It's quite straightforward what reflections do already. CSGO already has reflections. But it goes about this the brute force way. It creates another map inside the one you're playing in to represent what's seen in the reflection. That reflection is not a reflection, it's another place, and the people you see in it are all trapped there. Help. Doing reflections this way obviously comes with a hefty framerate penalty itself, plus it's limited to just one reflection at a time. Unlike with ray tracing, which can easily calculate 1, 4 or 100 mirrors all pointing in different directions at the same time, CSGO can only do one at once, and any more than that will break it. So that's the benefit of ray traced reflections. Sure, it slows your PC down to have them in the first place, but after you've sustained that hit, it doesn't really matter how many differently angled reflections you can see at a time. Not unless you point two mirrors at each other, forcing the computer to calculate infinite light bounces. Valve, please fix. So in CSGO, ray-traced reflections would mean that sniper scopes could actually reflect the environment behind you. Right now, these scope reflections are simply pre-drawn cube map images from the rough area of the map that you're in, but with a dynamic ray-traced reflection, you'd be able to see enemies creeping up in your sniper scope. Or you could break a window and to use its shards to grant you fragmented vision of the environment around you. And that stupidly large knife you spent a fortune on could become pay to win by acting as an effective mirror, doubling up as an opti one that lets you see round corners without revealing your body at all. That would be cool. And also stupid. And failing that, a fallen player's visor could serve as a makeshift reflective surface, if you had a scope powerful enough to see it, and had they remembered to polish their gear that morning. And ray tracing isn't just about the graphics, it can be used to simulate the sound too. If you think about it, sound bounces about the place just like light does. By calculating how long it takes to reach you and from which direction, CSGO's directional sound would finally be good enough to work. And it would help mappers too. You know when I changed the colour of the sky recently? Well, the 1,000 or so of you who bothered to click the video will. The fog can easily be changed, but every time you want to change the world's lighting, it requires a lengthy render of the whole map. Because CSGO already uses ray tracing to calculate the lighting in-game, it's just that it's done in advance, before players even load the map up. And it takes hours and hours to do. It's the reason why places already have shadows and convincingly shaded interiors. But all this is baked in and unable to change in real time. If you think about it, if you throw a Molotov, smoke or flashbang, then these things should greatly alter the brightness of an area, and each of them in different ways. A Molotov would light the area up in extremely soft, dancing shadows with changing colours. A flashbang would be a temporary flash of brilliant light, casting sharp shadows all over the place. From the shadows it casts, you'd be able to see exactly where it's gone off, even from around corners. You'd even be able to make out players who are stood between it and the walls. You could use flashbangs as makeshift sonar, and smoke grenades, if tossed into a doorway, could plunge the interior into darkness. And if we're going to the lengths to calculate ray tracing, then we might as well throw in proper volumetric smoke and fluid dynamics as well, so that the smoke would pour out convincingly in all directions. So that's what Global Offensive could be, with ray tracing in a magical world where everybody has hardware capable of running it without slowdown. But we have to ask ourselves, is this really what Counter-Strike's about? Is it really what we play the game for? If we wanted destructible environments, would Counter-Strike be the right game to implement it in? Or would a separate title like Rainbow Six Siege be a better option instead? So yeah, ray tracing in Global Offensive is but a dream for now. But Source 2, that's a thing. I've yet to see it support ray tracing, but there are improvements and optimizations made in the likes of Dota 2 and Half-Life Alyx, which might better suit the demands of CSGO's player base anyway. But who knows? One day, the Counter-Strike series may eventually join the ray-traced bandwagon.